Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that can literally make or break any big project cost management. You can think of it as a financial GPS, the thing that keeps you from driving off a cliff.
I mean, we've all heard the stories, right? Stadiums, tech projects, you name it. They all seem to go wildly over budget. But here's the thing. There's a really disciplined process designed to stop exactly that from happening. And we're going to break it all down.
Okay, so let's get right into the solution. It's a framework called project cost management, and it's really just a structured way to make sure a project actually gets finished within the budget that was approved. Simple as that.
Now, before we jump into the four-step process, we've got to make sure we're all speaking the same language. Understanding these basic types of costs is absolutely key if you're going to have any hope of managing them.
First up, you've got your fixed costs versus your variable costs. Pretty straightforward, right? Fixed costs, like the rent on your office, they just don't change. But variable costs, like raw materials or travel expenses, well, they go up and down as the work gets done. Next, we need to separate direct and indirect costs. So direct costs are tied right to the actual project work. Think of the wages for the team or the specific materials you need. Indirect costs are more like general overhead, the office supplies or the electricity bill that helps the project but isn't really part of its core budget. And finally, we have a concept that's, it's less about accounting and a lot more about psychology. It's this powerful idea that the money you've already spent should have zero influence on your future decisions. And let me tell you, that is a surprisingly hard rule to follow. This is what's known as a sunk cost. It's money that is gone forever. You can't get it back. The real discipline here is to completely ignore what you've already put in and make your next choice based only on what could happen in the future. It's a huge mental trap that can derail not just big projects, but our own personal decisions too. All right, so now that we've got the lingo down, let's start building our blueprint. This is the first part of our four-step journey to getting financial control, the planning and estimating phase. The whole entire framework really just rests on these 4 steps, and they have to happen in this order. First, you plan how you're going to manage the money, then you estimate the costs, you lock in the official budget, and then finally, you control everything for the rest of the project.
So that very first step, it's all about setting the rules of the game. The cost management plan is basically your rule book. It's a document that spells out exactly how you're going to handle every other money-related decision, from how you estimate to how you track everything.
This chart shows a really key idea in project planning. See, early on, your cost estimate is frankly a wild guess. It could be off by a ton. But as you learn more and more about the project, that estimate gets sharper and more accurate until finally you have a definitive number you can actually build a solid budget around. So you might be wondering, how do managers even come up with these numbers? Well, they use a few different tricks. Analogous estimating is quick and dirty. You just look at a similar project from the past. Parametric is a lot more accurate. It uses real data, like a cost per square foot. And then you have bottom-up, which is the most accurate but also takes forever because you're literally pricing out every single little task.
Okay, so once we've got all our detailed cost estimates for every part of the project, the next logical step is to roll them all up into the official project budget. This is the number that everyone's going to be held to.
We do this through something called cost aggregation, which is really just a fancy way of saying you're rolling everything up. You start with the costs for the small individual tasks, you combine those into bigger chunks of work, and then you just add all those up to get your grand total. And that final number becomes what's known as the cost baseline. This is your North Star. It's the official, approved version of the budget, and it's the yardstick you'll use to measure all your spending and performance against. But, and this is a really crucial point, the total project budget isn't just the baseline. Smart planners always add a buffer called management reserves. This is cash set aside for the unknown unknowns, the major, out-of-the-blue problems that nobody saw coming. Of course, having a perfect budget on paper is one thing. Actually sticking to it, that is a whole other challenge. And that brings us to the final and most continuous process, cost control. Cost control isn't something you do once. It's what you're doing all the time. You're constantly monitoring, constantly comparing what you plan to spend with what you've actually spent, and then making adjustments to keep things from going off the rails. And project managers aren't just winging it. They have a whole toolkit of powerful analytical methods, like the ones you see here. We won't get into all the math, but they all help answer one critical question. For the money we've spent so far, have we gotten the value we were supposed to?
This lets them spot trouble early and forecast what the final cost is going to be. So, after all that, let's bring it home. What's the big takeaway here? Why does any of this matter if you're trying to manage, well, anything really, from building a skyscraper to launching a new app? At the end of the day, project cost management is so much more than just accounting. It's about having control. This whole 4-step framework is your financial GPS. It gives you a map, it gives you a destination, your budget, and it gives you all the tools you need to course correct along the way, so you actually arrive on time and on budget. And that leaves us with one final thought to take away. That whole idea of not letting past expenses dictate future choices, that doesn't just apply to billion-dollar projects. It applies to our own careers, our relationships, pretty much every decision we make every single day.